Well, it appears the father of our country states may have another first to his credit. In April, archaeologists found 2 small bottles of well-preserved cherries at the Mount Vernon plantation.
What archaeologists uncovered beneath George Washington's Mount Vernon left even the most seasoned historians stunned.
Perfectly preserved cherries have been found in glass bottles at George Washington's historic Virginia mansion.
For generations, visitors walked the grounds believing every secret had already been uncovered, every room already understood. But a structural repair in early 2024 revealed something no one saw coming: an intact underground chamber sealed since the 18th century, holding bottles so well preserved they defied belief. Their contents would not only rewrite part of Washington's story, but also force us to reconsider who shaped it. So let's step beneath the floorboards and into a forgotten layer of American history. The illusion of knowing. Mount Vernon has long stood as a symbol of permanence. Perched above the Potomac River, its red roof and white columns form one of the most recognizable silhouettes in American memory. For over 2 centuries, it has been studied, restored, and revered, a museum of national origins that seem to leave no detail unexamined. Historians have walked its halls with notebooks in hand, scanning rooms shaped by George Washington himself, confident they had seen all there was to see. The house was an archive in wood and brick, layered with stories of revolution, leadership, and domestic ambition. Every doorway led to another well-documented corner of Washington's world. And because so much of Mount Vernon was cataloged with surgical precision, from weather logs to crop reports to architectural records, it was easy to believe its mysteries had already been unearthed. But that certainty was always an illusion. Beneath the curated tours and preserved rooms, the estate held secrets it had never given up, not because they were deliberately hidden, but because no one thought to look there. The foundations of the mansion, built up slowly from Washington's inheritance in 1754, weren't just structural, they were temporal, layering the past beneath the present like sediment beneath stone. And in early 2024, when preservationists peeled back a section of flooring to assess structural stability, they unknowingly cracked open a boundary that had held firm for nearly 250 years. Beneath the foundation. The revitalization project had been years in the making, a quiet effort to reinforce Mount Vernon's aging bones without disrupting its historical integrity. Preservationists approached the task with reverence, using soft brushes and hand tools instead of machines, expecting to find little more than construction debris or traces of 18th century renovations. But as the team began excavating beneath one section of the mansion, they noticed irregularities, subtle shifts in soil density, unfamiliar brickwork patterns, and compacted earth that resisted explanation. What began as routine structural analysis soon turned into an archaeological puzzle. The deeper the team dug, the clearer it became that something had been sealed away long ago. Then came the moment of revelation. A hollow space, faint but unmistakable, extending beneath a lesser-known portion of the mansion's foundation. With measured care, the archaeologists widened the opening and aimed their flashlights into the dark. What they saw defied expectations. It wasn't part of any known wine cellar, kitchen, or servant quarters. This was something else. A low-ceilinged, stone-walled chamber no one had entered for generations. The air that emerged was cool and damp, carrying the scent of aged stone and undisturbed soil. And along one wall, lined in a shallow trench of sand, sat 35 glass bottles, each one upright, each one sealed, each one preserved in silence. The bottles weren't merely old, they were pristine. Thick green glass, bubbled from early manufacturing techniques, glinted under the lamplight. Inside, shadows moved in liquid suspension. Fragments of fruit, seeds, and herbal matter, held in a dark viscous liquid that time had somehow forgotten. The taste of another century. Initial inspection suggested the bottles dated back to the mid-18th century, their design consistent with colonial-era glasswork. But it was what lay inside that truly startled the team. Laboratory analysis revealed an extraordinary level of preservation. Cherry pits and grape skins, still intact after nearly 2.5 centuries, suspended in a syrupy liquid that hinted at fermentation. Some bottles even contained fragments of cloth and sealing wax, pointing to early experimental methods of food and beverage preservation. Chemical testing identified traces of cherry, grape, and various botanical compounds, suggesting a form of fortified cordial or medicinal wine. These weren't leftovers discarded in haste. They were meticulously arranged and sealed with intention. And the biggest surprise of all came when botanists placed certain seeds under magnification. The fruit matter was so well preserved that germination trials became a real possibility. The idea that an orchard from George Washington's time might live again seemed suddenly within reach. But the discovery took on a deeper resonance with one overlooked historical detail. In 1774, George Washington recorded the purchase of 5 gallons of Persico, a cherry-based liqueur made by fermenting crushed cherry pits. Known for its subtle almond flavor, Persico was both a culinary indulgence and a household remedy in the colonial world. This wasn't conjecture. It was documented in his own ledger. That link turned the bottles from fascinating curiosities into personal artifacts, potentially prepared under his direction, consumed at his table, or stored for the future he was trying to shape. These bottles weren't just relics. They were evidence of a living world, tangible proof of tastes, techniques, and ambitions that had been bottled, sealed, and forgotten beneath the very floor where history had always been assumed to lie in plain sight. The ghosts in the record. While the bottles offered an unprecedented glimpse into the daily life of Mount Vernon, they also exposed the silences that have long echoed through its history. George Washington's name dominates the estate's records, and his meticulous journals speak volumes about weather, architecture, and agriculture. But absent from those pages are the hands that likely prepared these preserved fruits, the people who made his household run. Among them was Doll, an enslaved cook brought to Mount Vernon by Martha Washington in 1759. Though her presence is briefly noted in surviving documents, the scope of her knowledge, skill, and contribution can only be pieced together through indirect evidence. Like so many others in bondage on the estate, Doll's story is largely invisible in the written record. Yet the bottles themselves may reflect her expertise, the balance of sweetness and acidity, the careful sealing techniques, the choice of fruit, all suggest not just preservation, but intention, mastery, and care. Archaeology has increasingly become the means by which those hidden lives are rediscovered. Beyond the mansion walls, excavations have uncovered buttons, beads, clay pipes, and cooking tools, everyday items that hint at quiet resilience and cultural memory. The cellar's contents add a rare depth to this unfolding narrative. They may have been prepared by enslaved women who used knowledge passed down through generations, combining West African, European, and indigenous traditions to feed and sustain the estate. In recovering their work, we don't just expand the story of Mount Vernon, we challenge its core assumptions. The bottles aren't simply linked to Washington, they carry the weight of those who labored in his shadow, their ingenuity now rising to the surface in glass and fruit. A forgotten orchard. As scientists continued to study the cellar's contents, the discovery grew beyond its archaeological roots. The fruit preserved inside wasn't just chemically intact, it was biologically viable. DNA analysis conducted by the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Research Service revealed heirloom strains of cherries and berries no longer found in modern cultivation. Some seeds had avoided decay so completely that germination trials were initiated under controlled conditions, raising the astonishing possibility of reviving 18th century varietals. This effort wasn't just agricultural curiosity, it was historical restoration at the cellular level. If successful, the orchard that once thrived under George Washington's stewardship could be reborn, not as a replica, but as a direct descendant of the plants that fed his table. The implications reach far beyond horticulture. These fruits may contain unique nutritional or medicinal profiles shaped by the soil and climate of colonial Virginia, and untouched by modern breeding or industrial farming. Washington himself once described Mount Vernon as his experiment in American agriculture, a phrase that now feels prophetic. The bottles buried beneath his home suggest that the experiment continues, centuries later, through the convergence of science and history. But they also serve as a metaphor. Just as seeds slept in darkness, waiting to take root again, so too have parts of America's founding story remained dormant. Until now. The orchard isn't just a garden waiting to bloom, it's a bridge to another era, and its return invites us to consider what else we've unknowingly buried beneath the familiar surface of the past. The women who watched over the dust. Long before archaeologists uncovered the cellar, Mount Vernon nearly slipped into ruin. By the 1850s, the estate had deteriorated so severely that tourists stripped pieces of wood from the walls as souvenirs, and rot threatened to erase the structure entirely. But salvation came from an unexpected source, a group of women with no formal power, but unshakable resolve. Led by Anne Pamela Cunningham, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association formed in 1853 to rescue Washington's home. At a time when women couldn't vote or hold office, they orchestrated one of the earliest historic preservation movements in America. They raised funds town by town, organized public appeals, and eventually purchased the estate in 1858. Their mission wasn't just to restore the house, it was to safeguard a national memory. It was their care that kept Mount Vernon intact, long enough for new generations to explore it. Without their preservation work, the bottles sealed in that hidden cellar might never have survived. Their legacy lives not just in the paint or plaster, but in the space they defended, for history to keep unfolding. Today their vision feels vindicated. What they protected wasn't just a house, it was the possibility that the past might still have something left to say. Mount Vernon had kept its secret sealed for centuries. Now, with the bottles unearthed and their contents studied, a forgotten layer of Washington's world has come to light. Tangible, surprising, and deeply human. Curious what else lies beneath America's past? Subscribe for more discoveries and share your thoughts below.